In the spring of 1940, with German armies pouring across Europe, Britain came to a small California aircraft company with a modest request: build someone else's fighter under license and build it fast. The company refused. Instead, they made a promise that veteran engineers called Impossible, a brand new fighter, designed from a blank sheet of paper in roughly 120 days. The man they handed that promise to was not famous, not formally educated, and not even born in America. He was a quiet, self-taught immigrant from Germany, and his name was Edgar Schmued. Before we dive in, subscribe and tell me in one sentence where in the world you're watching from. I read every single comment. To understand what he did in those 120 days, you have to understand what the world had already done to him. Edgar Schmued was born in the small German town of Hornbach in the last days of 1999, the son of an Austrian father. When he was 8 years old, he looked up and saw an airplane in flight for the first time, and in that moment, a boy standing in the dirt decided what the rest of his life would be. There was no money for a university, so he built his education himself, one borrowed book at a time, an apprenticeship in a small engine factory by day, self-study by night, until the boy with no diploma held patents on engine components before most men his age had held a steady job. In the First World War, he served as a mechanic in the Austro-Hungarian aviation troops, close enough to touch the airplanes every day, never once asked to create one. And when the war ended and the German economy collapsed around him, he did what dreamers with empty pockets have always done. He left. In 1925, he boarded a ship for Brazil and talked his way into General Motors' aviation branch. And his work there was so good that in 1931, in the depths of the Depression, when America was letting almost no one in, General Motors sponsored him into the United States. He came with his wife, Louisa, and this is the part of the story almost nobody tells. By 1935, Schmued was designing aircraft in Maryland when North American Aviation moved its operations to Los Angeles. Louisa did not want to leave the East Coast, so Edgar chose her. He turned down the move and took a lesser job nearby, just to stay where she was happy. It didn't last. And on the road west to California, no cameras, no headlines, just a highway and a single terrible moment. A traffic accident took Louisa's life and very nearly took his. The man who had crossed an ocean twice for a dream arrived at that dream alone, with everything he loved buried behind him. In early 1936, he walked into the office of North American's president, James Dutch Kindleberger, and went to work as a preliminary design engineer. He drew a bomber turret, a small fighter for Peru, design work on what would become the B-25. He rose to chief of preliminary design, and the men around him noticed the same thing. He was always at his board, early and late, as if the work itself was holding him upright. If you have ever buried someone and gone back to work because the silence at home was unbearable, then you already understand Edgar Schmued better than history ever did. Grief does not leave a man like Edgar Schmued, it goes into the work. Then came April of 1940, and the question he had been waiting for his entire life. France was weeks from falling, and Britain's purchasing commission needed fighters faster than British factories could build them. So they asked North American to simply license build the Curtiss P-40, an airplane already going stale. Kindleberger walked over to Schmued's board and asked him, "Straight out, Ed, do we want to build P-40s here?" And savor for a moment, who was asking whom? Kindleberger's own nickname was Dutch, American slang for Deutsch, because his family had immigrated from Nothweiler, a village in the same corner of Germany where Edgar Schmued was born, barely a day's walk from Hornbach. Two sons of the same forgotten hills standing in a California drafting room, about to build the airplane that would decide the fate of the skies above their father's homeland. And the quiet man gave the answer that would echo across a continent. "Well, Dutch, don't let us build an obsolete airplane. Let's build a new one. We can design and build a better one." The British agreed on brutal terms, 320 aircraft, no more than $40,000 apiece, and a design deadline measured not in years, as fighters always had been, but in days, roughly 120 of them. What happened next in Inglewood, California, is one of the great forgotten sprints in engineering history. Schmued kept his team small and close, drafting boards nearly touching, because he believed men create faster when they can lean over and argue. They worked into the night, every night, and went home early on Sundays at 6 in the evening. Schmued designed the cockpit around a real human being, a pilot 5'10", 140 pounds, so that the airplane would fit a man the way a glove fits a hand. He shaped the fuselage with pure mathematics, conic sections flowing into surfaces smoother than anything the industry had seen, and he gave it a wing unlike any fighter before it, the new NACA laminar flow airfoil, designed to let air slide across it with almost no resistance. Even the radiator under the belly was a small act of genius, pushing heated air out the back with enough force to give a little thrust back. And when rivals later whispered that North American must have stolen the design from Curtiss because they had bought Curtiss wind tunnel data for $56,000, historians took the accusation apart. The lines of the Mustang belonged to one grieving immigrant and his exhausted, devoted team. 117 days after the order, on September 9, 1940, the prototype NA-73X rolled out of the hangar, 3 days ahead of schedule, after 78,000 man-hours. It rolled out silent, because the engine had not even arrived yet. They photographed it with dummy exhaust stacks sitting on wheels borrowed from a trainer. On October 26th, test pilot Vance Breese lifted it off Mines Field, and every man watching understood they had built something the world had never seen. And then, 3 weeks later, they nearly lost it all. Breese had made a bet with North American executives, a bet that the company's own chief test pilot, Paul Balfour, would crash the prototype on his very first flight. Before that flight, Schmued did what careful men do. He offered to walk Balfour through the cockpit, switch by switch. Balfour waved him off with 6 words that should haunt every proud professional watching this. One airplane is like another. 12 minutes into the flight, the engine went silent. The only Mustang on Earth came down in a plowed field and flipped onto its back. The official report blamed fuel starvation. The lesson blamed something older. The designer had been ignored, and it would not be the last time. Because when America's own army got 2 Mustangs completely free as part of the British deal, they parked them at Wright Field and forgot them. When test pilot Bob Chilton visited in October 1941, he found one of them sitting with barely a single flight hour added since delivery. The official history of the Army Air Forces would later write the sentence that says everything. The story of the P-51 came close to representing the costliest mistake made by the Army Air Forces in World War II. Before the Mustang could fight anyone, it had to survive being ignored by its own side. It was strangers who saved it. That December, a letter from the British gave the nameless prototype the name it would carry into legend, Mustang, after the wild, untamed horse of the American plains. And British pilots flying it low over occupied France discovered it was the fastest thing they had ever flown near the ground. But its Allison engine gasped in the thin air up high, exactly where the war was being decided. Then, in April 1942, a Rolls-Royce test pilot named Ronnie Harker climbed into one for 30 minutes and came down changed. Days later, he wrote the memo that altered the Second World War. Give this airframe a Merlin engine, the same heart that powered the Spitfire. And buried in that memo is a detail that should make you ache. Harker praised the Mustang's design and guessed it was so good because it was designed by one of the Messerschmitt designers now working in America. It wasn't true. Edgar Schmued never worked for Messerschmitt. It was a rumor that would chase him his whole life. The man saving the Mustang didn't even know who had created it. History rarely knows the names of the men who draw it, but the Merlin knew. In October 1942, the first converted Mustang hit 433 miles per hour, 4 miles up. America ordered 400 of the new breed before a single American conversion had even flown. And when the XP-51B finally did fly that November, it reached 441 miles per hour at nearly 30,000 feet, 100 miles per hour faster, up where it mattered, than the airplane had ever been. In the halls of Washington, the Mustang's loudest voice was a man Hollywood couldn't invent, Tommy Hitchcock, a world-famous polo star whose glamour F. Scott Fitzgerald borrowed for The Great Gatsby. His verdict cut Washington to the bone. Sired by the English out of an American mother, the Mustang has no parent in the Army Air Corps to appreciate and push its good points. By the first days of 1944, the boy from Hornbach's airplane was about to inherit the entire sky. General Jimmy Doolittle took command of the 8th Air Force in January and issued the order that changed everything. The fighters would no longer just huddle beside the bombers, they would hunt the German Air Force down and destroy it. In the last week of February, during the all-out assault cruise called Big Week, the Mustang went into battle in force at last. The men flying it had barely met their new machines. The 4th Fighter Group traded up to Mustangs on February 28th, some pilots logging less than a single hour in the cockpit before taking them to war. And on March 4th, 1944, the impossible happened over the capital of the Reich. American single-engine fighters appeared in the sky above Berlin, 1,100 miles there and back, a trip no fighter of its kind had ever made. Inside the bombers, Tin-Man crews who had spent a year watching the sky for their killers now looked out and saw silver fighters holding station beside them, all the way there and all the way home. And they gave those fighters the tenderest nickname of the entire war. They called them their little friends. The numbers tell you what that tenderness was built on. Monthly loss rates that had been bleeding the 8th dry fell from over 5% to under 2%. Behind every 0.1%, boys who got to grow old. For the Luftwaffe, it was the end arriving in plain sight. Over 500 German fighter pilots lost in March alone, nearly 450 more in April. Machines could be rebuilt. Those men could not. In post-war interrogation, Hermann Göring, the man who had once boasted that no enemy bomber would ever reach Berlin, is reported to have said, "When they came with fighter escorts over Berlin, I knew the jig was up." Somewhere in Inglewood, a quiet 44-year-old German-born American read those mission reports. He never said much about how it felt. He did not have to. The airplane set it over Berlin at 441 miles per hour, and 6 weeks after that first Berlin escort, the story claimed its cruelest price. Tommy Hitchcock, unwilling to let a younger pilot take the risk, went up himself to chase down a diving flaw in the Mustang, and never came home. The airplane's greatest champion did not live to see the victory he had made possible. By war's end, 15,486 Mustangs had been built, and its pilots were credited with destroying nearly 5,000 enemy aircraft in the air, more than any other American fighter in Europe. A United States Senate committee, chaired by a man named Harry Truman, called it the most aerodynamically perfect pursuit plane in existence, and Edgar Schmued was not finished. His hands went on to shape the F-86 Sabre, the swept-wing legend of Korea, and later, at Northrop, the team he built created the F-5 and the T-38, the supersonic trainer that has taught every American Air Force fighter pilot for more than 50 years. Think about that the next time you watch a modern jet climb. Somewhere in that pilot's story is an airplane drawn by the self-taught boy from Hornbach. Schmued worked almost to his final days, and when he died on June 1st, 1985, he left behind one line that belongs on the wall of every workshop on Earth. Any damned fool can criticize, but it takes a genius to design it in the first place. And this story is not history. It is still in the air. 4 months ago, on March 30th, 2026, America buried Brigadier General Bud Anderson at Arlington, the last of the great Triple Aces, a man who flew 116 combat missions in Mustangs he named Old Crow and never once took an enemy hit. As his family stood at the grave, P-51 Mustangs thundered over Arlington in the missing man formation, 2 of them wearing the name Old Crow on their noses, one of them still flying today. Anderson's own verdict on Schmued's machine was simple. It was a wonderful airplane. It probably saved the air war in Europe. Today, 310 Mustangs still exist, and more than 160 of them still fly. This summer, at an air show somewhere near you, one of them will pass low overhead, and you will hear that Merlin sound that men once heard over Berlin. When it happens, tell the person next to you the name nobody remembers. Germany gave Edgar Schmued the grief. America gave him the drafting table, and the sound of what he did with both still rolls across free skies 86 years later. If you want to meet the fighter, the Mustang was built to hunt. The FW-190, created by a test pilot named Tank, that story is on your screen right now.